Hey, what's going on, guys? How is everybody doing? She may look dressed for battle, however, Noelle remains but a humble maid of the Knights of Favonius for the time being, at least. Since a small child, Noelle has held onto the dream that she may one day find herself joined in the ranks as a full-fledged knight. She spends her days as a maid studying the other knights, constantly taking notes to perfect her knightly conduct and customs. Maybe one day we may see her yet grow into that armor that she so deserves. We'll be talking about the stats you should be prioritizing, how to build your artifact sets, what weapons she'll get the most performance from, and what talents you should focus on. We'll be judging these from free-to-play level all the way up to an endgame primary hero. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit that notification bell, that way you never miss a video, and join our Discord. Link will be down in the description below. Now with that out of the way, let's jump right into the video. You'd think that as a maid of the Knights of Favonius, where her main duties are to serve, she'd make a pretty good support unit or healer, but you'd be mistaken. That's actually a common misconception. There are a few key factors that hinder her performance as a support unit, those being that she herself doesn't generate any energy from her skill, she can only heal when on the battlefield and when her shield is active, and she provides no significant utility when off the field, rendering her more or less a dead unit on the team. These are all major factors when picking support units, and why you'll often see heroes classified as carries not translate into a supporting role. Think of your favorite main DPS for a second. You might have Diluc, Razor, Child, Kaching, maybe Zhao. As powerful as all of these heroes are, why do we never see them in supporting roles? Well, they do generate energy, but the big factor here is that they don't provide any value to the team when they're off the field, rendering them effectively useless, which is why they perform as a main DPS so well. Their kit is built with the fact that they have to be your active hero in mind. This is where Noelle falls short as well. We'll look more into specifics on her limitations when we discuss her kit in the next section, but keep this in mind that when we discuss her artifacts and weapons, we'll be looking at how to maximize her performance as a main DPS and not a support hero, as this is not where her performance is best realized. Instead, she is a rock-solid, tanky carry, very difficult to kill and can land some big blows. Though she doesn't have the synergy with other heroes as a Pyro or Hydro carry might have, that honestly makes her a bit more flexible in the fact that she isn't heavily tied to a support of a certain element. She may not kill as quickly as a Hu Tao or Gan Yu, but she doesn't fall as easily either, which makes her a perfect carry for bosses or abyss floors like the current floor 12, where it's quite easy to get combo killed out of nowhere. Noelle's basic attack combo deals 4 slashing strikes and works in tandem with her burst for massive damage. Her charge attack spins her around like a top, dealing damage to all enemies around her in a full 360 degrees. This will be an important tool if you need to heal very quickly, as her charge attacks deal hits much faster than her basic attack combo. Her skill, Breastplate, is her full defense ability, summoning a protective barrier to prevent a certain amount of damage scaling off of her defense stat. Activating the skill will deal geo damage in a small area of effect, and while the shield is active, Noelle has a chance of regenerating HP for all members in the party upon hitting an enemy. This chance increases as the talent is leveled up, the healing also scaling with her defense. It's this skill that tricks players into thinking that she's an effective healer, but let's look at some of the details of why I don't think this is the case. As we mentioned before, activating this skill generates no energy, which will be more relevant once we take a look at her burst. But remember that there is only a chance to heal all the members in your party. It's not a guarantee, which means that since Noelle will most likely be built with defense in mind, she won't really be dealing a lot of damage, and that leads to a lot of wasted time where she's on the field, but no progress is really being made on your enemy's health bars. And if the shield should be broken, well, there goes all your healing potential. On top of this, her skill is a very long cooldown at 24 seconds. This can be extremely detrimental if you're finding yourself in need of healing in a timely fashion, though this long cooldown time is mitigated by her Ascension 4 passive, reducing the cooldown time by 1 second after every 4th normal or charged hit. There's also an additional bonus to the skill from her first Ascension passive, triggering whenever a hero other than Noelle on the field drops below 30% HP. A shield will be generated that absorbs damage equal to 400% of Noelle's defense, and has a 150% absorption rate against physical and elemental damage, so basically everything, making her a bit of a safety net. Though having a shield simply for protection is not playing to win, it's simply playing to not lose, and is one of the reasons Zhongli wasn't as ubiquitous as he is now because of the universal resistance shred that his shield now provides. For more information on this, check out my full breakdown video of why Noelle fails as a healer. So that leads us into Noelle's burst, which is her true weapon. Creating a Geosword to supplement her own, she strikes enemies in a large AoE at a distant range, converting her attack damage into geo damage and gaining an additional attack bonus based off of her defense. This is her bread and butter, and with proper heroes supporting her, can essentially keep this up 100% of the time and make her a very strong AoE based carry. A huge boon to this skill over someone like Razor, for example, on the surface they seem quite similar, is that Noelle can switch out during this burst. When she returns, her burst will still be active, meaning that she isn't as selfish as someone like Razor, who wants their supports to proc their skills all at the same time so that he can remain on the field and do damage during his entire burst window. Noelle is flexible and can come in and out when needed. Now, once you unlock Noelle's first Constellation, having both her burst and skill active will result in a 100% chance for each hit to generate a heal for your entire team, drastically helping her healing potential. But remember that this still doesn't change her energy problem. Even with the buff her first Constellation provides, as a support, Noelle will spend most of the time on the bench, which means she's not getting an on-field energy generation boost, and depending on your team comp, may not be getting a same type elemental boost either, meaning it'll take a good long while to get this burst charged up, which essentially renders it useless. With both a duration and cooldown of 15 seconds, and because you can switch Noelle in and out with her burst up, with the right composition of supporting heroes, Noelle can essentially never use her basic attack as physical damage, and you can keep her as a geo carry through and through. Also keep in mind that because she gets an attack boost when her burst is up, it's beneficial to use her burst first, then her skill, so that her skill damage benefits from the attack boost she gains. For talent prioritizations, first things first, get all of her skills up to level 6. This is the point at which you start needing gold talent books and materials from weekly bosses. Once you've completed this, her basic attack should come first. Even though her burst is her most important aspect for her carry build, remember that her burst numbers only enhance the attack multipliers from her basic attack, since this is how she deals all of her damage. So making sure that the base skill is leveled up should be the priority. Next is then her burst, though you could argue that this should be a bit more balanced with her skill depending on what constellation you have her at, which we will discuss when we go over her stat prioritizations when talking about artifacts. So what about her constellations? Well, Noelle's constellations actually create a few breaking points for what we would consider in how to build her stats, but first let's go over these said constellations. Constellation 1 we've already discussed, increasing her healing chance per hit to 100% when you have both her skill and burst active. Constellation 2 decreases her stamina consumption and increases the damage of her charge attack. Constellation 3 and 5 are typical skill and burst promotions. Constellation 4 deals 400% attack as geo damage to surrounding opponents when Noelle's shield breaks from damage or the duration expires. And finally, Constellation 6 adds an additional 50% of her defense to her attack and increases the duration of her burst by 1 second for every enemy defeated. Noelle has two main artifact sets to consider when building her as a main carry, though in my opinion, one of these makes far more sense than the other. These two sets being a full 4-piece set of Gladiator's Finale and a 4-piece set of Retracing Bolide. Both sets are quite similar, providing a small boost in performance from their 2-set bonus and providing an overall damage bonus to her basic attacks from their 4-set bonus. Gladiator's Finale is a bit less restrictive though, having the 4-piece set bonus active always as long as you're using basic attacks, also receiving the extra 18% attack bonus, which is some nice help to improve her damage. But if we're being honest, that doesn't really compare to what Retracing Bolide provides. First off, we have a 35% improvement to her shield. Keep in mind this is only for her, this doesn't transfer to your other units, but with the buffs her shield received in patch 1.3 now providing 150% protection against everything as opposed to 250% against geo damage specifically, Retracing Bolide got a sneaky little buff. The 4-piece set bonus is also a bit nicer, this bonus also increasing the damage of Noelle's charge attacks, something Gladiators doesn't do. There's a slight restriction in that she must have a shield active, but in most cases this won't really be relevant. Also relevant is that Bolide is much easier to farm, so for my pick, I'm going Retracing Bolide every day of the week. But what about the stats you should be running on each artifact or looking for in terms of substats? Well, as I mentioned when talking about our constellations, there are a few breaking points which I would consider when building your Noelle. These will extend to her weapons as well. These breaking points are Constellations 0 to 4, Constellation 5, and Constellation 6. So first let's talk for a moment on why these breaks exist. It all stems from how good her C6 actually is and what it does to her kit. Without her Constellation 6, Noelle only gains roughly 50 to 60% of her defense as attack, depending on how leveled up her burst is. Essentially, meaning that any artifact that you put on her as a defense piece is essentially having its stats cut in half, making attack the much better stat to go for without this Constellation. This is why prioritizing leveling up her burst isn't as important as her C6 build at lower Constellations, because increasing the boost from her defense isn't going to be important. So instead, improving the takiness of her shield is more effective at this Constellation range. So how does C5 fit into this equation then? Well, assuming you've gotten your burst up to level 6, Constellation 5 past this point will provide Noelle with a 12% boost to her defense conversion, bringing her up to at least 68% of her defense being converted into attack. Should you level this up further, say to level 8, which converts it to level 11 with Constellation, we're now looking at a 76% conversion, making us quite a bit closer to that 100% mark, making defense more of an option. If you have a team that can consistently maintain Noelle's burst uptime, it now becomes an option to build her for defense and start looking at that C6 build. So when looking at her actual builds, if your Noelle is in the C0 to C4 range, we should be looking at either an attack or energy recharge timepiece, depending on your team comp and how consistently you can activate her burst. For all of her builds, her circlet will stay the same as a crit percentage piece, depending on what your individual build needs, either rate or damage. At this Constellation range though, her goblet can be a tricky one, as we essentially have 3 options. A physical damage cup if you have trouble activating her burst on cooldown, a geo cup if you have no problems keeping her burst up and will translate better once you obtain more Constellations, or an attack percentage cup for a bit of both. I personally recommend an attack percentage cup at this level unless you're confident in your team in generating enough energy for Noelle, in which case a geo cup is much preferred. For a C5 build, since we can start looking at defense, I would start looking for teams that can actively provide enough energy for Noelle, as you've probably been playing a bit longer and have a more well-rounded roster. The energy recharge option should now be switched out for defense, as this will be what we're looking to build with one more Constellation, and we should scrap the physical damage cup entirely, now deciding between either attack percent or geo damage. Lastly, her ultimate carry build, once you unlock her C6, defense is the ex facto timepiece you should be looking for. Now at C6, she receives more than a 100% attack boost from her defense, so an attack piece is now actually losing her damage, and we've now transitioned away from her attack cup and we are all in on geo damage, as we want to maximize her time under the effect of her burst. As we said before, Noelle's best weapons will heavily depend on what constellation she resides at, as this will determine whether attack or defense should be your main focus. At C0 to C4, Noelle's best in slot weapon will be, surprise surprise, Wolf's Gravestone. This weapon is simply a stat stick for any hero that just wants to improve their attack. The other 2 5-star claymores are the next best, and in terms of damage, they're very close to one another. The real factor to help you decide here is, first of all, which one do you actually have, but should you have both, which aspect do you want? Do you want a bit more tankiness? Go with the Unforged. Or a bit more help getting to that burst? Go for Skyward Pride. For the best 4-star alternatives, Serpent Spine will be your best choice, followed by Blackcliff Slasher and the Lithic Blade, though you would want to prioritize heroes from Liyue if using this weapon for optimal performance. Serpent Spine is a weapon that will get better upon unlocking further constellations, but because at the moment we're scaling off of attack, there are simply better options. Notably, you'll see that White Blind, notoriously one of Noelle's best weapons, is off this list completely. Remember that because we're only receiving roughly a 50 to 60% attack boost from our defense, this drops White Blind's utility a lot at this current constellation. For a free-to-play or budget option, Prototype Amnis will give you the best performance, though keep in mind that if you plan on using Noelle in the long run, it may not be worth it to burn those prototypes on this weapon, as you'll soon want them for White Blind. Which leads us into the endgame build, or end Noelle build, should I say. That being her C5 to C6 build. C5 is when I would start looking at weapons more revolving around defense, and although this isn't technically the optimal list for C5 builds, I would consider you close enough and should start planning for your C6 build at this time. Our top weapons are now White Blind at the top, followed by Serpent Spine and the Unforged. All these weapons can jockey for position, with the Unforged ultimately coming out on top at R5, but because the 4-star weapons are easier to refine, they're generally going to be better options. So what exactly made Serpent Spine jump both Skyward Spine and Wolf Gravestone? Well, in terms of raw individual hits, Wolf's Gravestone is still going to outpace it. But because of the crit rate of Serpent Spine and the fact that Noelle's shield will prevent us from losing stacks and taking more damage, and because Serpent Spine increases our damage, not attack, we're receiving over 100% attack boost from our defense. A damage boost is more of a help than straight attack percentage boost. It's also much easier to refine a Serpent Spine than a Gravestone, and Serpent Spine also performs better on Noelle compared to other Claymore heroes. So your Gravestone may be suited better elsewhere. Skyward Spine drops off in terms of damage because the passive damage is no longer gaining any benefit from our artifacts. And at this point, we should be more than able to build a team around Noelle and shouldn't manage to have any energy recharge problems. At this point, White Blind is your budget option as it is a craftable weapon, but if you burned all of your prototypes already, my guess is that it would be for a prototype Animus, which would be your alternative. In conclusion, Noelle is a bit of a misunderstood and misutilized hero who should be looked at primarily for her damage output as opposed to her healing potential. If you just want a no-brain content, slap on a shield and go to town on enemies without fear of dying, Noelle may just be the carry for you. Hopefully you guys have found this guide useful and it will help you in building your own Noelle. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell, that way you never miss a video, and join our Discord. Link will be down in the description below. But guys, that's all I have for today. Hopefully you did enjoy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.